Well, I've got God on my side. I'm just trying to survive. What if what you do to survive kills the things you love? Fear's a dangerous thing. Can turn your heart black you can trust. It'll take your God-filled soul, fill it with devils and dust. That's Bruce Springsteen. His song Devils and Dust. Hi everybody, welcome to Cave Slope. Today I have a very special guest on. I have not seen him since our deployment in Afghanistan, and it has been good to see him these last few days. But he's got a very interesting story to tell, and it's a story that will probably help other people. That
That's
might
our
be
hope.
that is our hope. Please welcome to the slope, Mr. Erik Greer. How are you, Erik?
Good now that I'm down here finally.
Excellent. So, Erik, we, myself and you, we deployed to Afghanistan in 2006. Came back 2007.
Yeah, some earlier than others.
So, Greer, me and you, we deployed in the spring of 2006
Yeah,
to Afghanistan,
yeah.
to the lovely Pesh River Valley of Afghanistan. That deployment was rough, man.
That was the start of rough. But yes, it was the true definition of really rough.
So I wanted to set a little bit of background to the rest of your story, and the background is the deployments.
Yeah.
Tell me about your experience overall on the deployment.
That deployment, it was eventful. Constant firefights. But it was our training. Like, we were ready for it. We were, prepared. And you really learn real quick who's gonna do their job, who's gonna hide, who's gonna do what. And you really learn real quick who's got your back, who's got your left and your right.
Right. So we deployed with 132 Infantry Battalion out of Fort Drum, New York.
10th Mountain Division.
10th Mountain Division. We were heavy weapons platoon, which meant that we fired the 50 cal machine gun. We fired the Mark 19.
Had an ITAS. We had the 249 and a 240.
249, 240. What does ITAS stand for?
Improvised Target Acquisition Subsystem. It was my main system. It was my weapon of choice.
And what does it fire?
It fires a TOW-2 Alpha and a TOW-2 Bravo. It fires essentially what is a missile out of a tube, whether it's ground mounted or Humvee mounted.
Okay.
Essentially.
What was your job over there, Greer?
I had many at this point.
Let's start with your first one. What was your first job?
I was Dog 2-1's driver.
Okay.
And then I became the RTO. And then the ITAS, obviously. I learned the ins and out of the ITAS system. As you learn the ins and out of every system in your platoon.
Right.
But the ITAS, it was the funnest to shoot. It was enjoyable. But it also had the highest capability, as far as even Overwatch. Like, even if you didn't shoot it, we could point the Mark 19 and 50 cal in the direction they needed to go.
Because there was a laser on it on
the
top.
The PEC-2.
And you could point that using the missile system.
Mm-hmm. Right on target.
And the
every
50
time.
cal knew exactly where to go.
Yeah, every time.
I got you. Well, I was there, so I know all this stuff.
You were my gunner for probably the first half of the deployment, yeah.
Greer, I've never met somebody more capable than you in all the jobs that you had. RTO, it's amazing. You always had a feel on it. Sergeant Carter, always believed you were the greatest driver in the whole company, which I don't know, that's debatable, but
Yeah.
we'll go with it. The LT stole you.
Yeah, I went on R&R, and when I came back, I don't think it was the LT's driver's turn to go on R&R, but I think Sergeant Carter's praise of my driving, the LT wanted me as his driver.
So we went from March all the way to September. I had a lot of firefights. I had a lot of encounters. Tell me about September.
September was rough because it started out horrible. We had a truck go down, and it had to go to Asadabad to get some work done on it, and we had to go back and pick it up. I think we went back September 10th to pick it up. We stayed the night, and we left sometime in the evening of September 11th, and that's when a Humvee rolled over in front of me. That Humvee that had just gotten fixed had rolled over in front of me. I was the third vehicle in line. We didn't have enough people to correctly man this Humvee. You have a driver, a gunner, and a TC. We only had a driver and gunner, which is the bare minimum if you're going to move a Humvee. And this particular Humvee had DePotty as the gunner and Schmidt as the driver. And when you're driving blackout, you can see the red light on the vehicle in front of you. And I didn't see it. I saw it down in a field, laying in kind of a weird position. Honestly, I don't remember putting my truck in park. I don't remember stopping my truck. The only thing I remember is opening the door and jumping down there to do whatever I had to do. And that was, we got Schmitty out. We had to break the driver door because it was actually laying on the passenger side with the driver's side up. And the gun was facing towards the road or the turret. We got him out, but my next focus, because we had 4 or 5 people up on top of that truck, my next focus was, where's DePotty? Because there wasn't anybody else inside the truck.
DePotty was on the gun.
Yeah, DePotty was on the gun when the vehicle rolled, and he was actually laying kind of half in the mud because it had just rained probably for 2 or 3 days straight. The road was pretty muddy.
I was telling you the other day that I feel a little bit guilty for several reasons. One, that was my truck.
Mm-hmm.
I got retasked to another truck for that mission.
Mm-hmm.
And there's times I think that if I had been on that gun, it would have been me instead of DePotty down there in the mud. And there's an element of survivor's guilt there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
The other thing I was telling you that I was guilty of is that this is something that should be so clear in my mind because it's something that stands out so vividly in that deployment.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there's elements of that scene. There's elements of that scene that are blurry in my mind. Like I couldn't remember if it was raining or not.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think it was raining.
It had stopped raining before we were starting on this trip.
DePotty was still alive when we got him up to the road.
Barely. I remember when I got down and I found him, I didn't move him. I didn't try to pull him out from the mud. I just because of my relationship with him, I held him until more help could get there to move him, to put him on the stretcher. Like, we yelled to pull that stretcher down, and get him on a stretcher. He might have been alive when we got him to the road, but being the person that I am, I felt him leave before we even got him on the gurney. It's something I wrote about. I wrote a stressor letter about it. Every detail, every touch, every feel, every smell, just every detail. And you read it today, and you'd swear you were there. And I've had a few people read it. Most of them can't get through it. They just start crying.
It's rough. It really is rough. And when we got him up on the road, I remember we had Doc Ramirez was working on him, and we had the medevac that got called on the field opposite the road, and there was corn that was growing on the road.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, I wonder how I did it. There was only 4 of us, and the mud was knee deep, and the corn was flattened toward us by the chopper wash. To this day, I don't know how I managed to hold my corner of the litter up as high as I did and make it to the chopper.
Yeah.
Like, just, I guess, sheer adrenaline. Like, it's just one of those.
At that point, it's your training. It's that the person on that litter that's your battle buddy to your left and right. That's a battle buddy that you relied on, and so you'll do whatever it takes. I remember getting him up on the road. The litter was gone. I got up on the road, and I buried my head, and I sat in front of the Humvee and buried my head, and I totally lost it. We had to get picked up by another platoon, and taken back to our vehicle patrol base. I remember the chaplain coming out the next day, and then we kind of just went back on to our mission.
The mission goes on.
Yes, we didn't really have time to process it, or to really take it all in, because we still had a mission to do. We still had a fight to fight.
So there was moving on from September. There was a little bit of a restructuring. They moved us into the main Kunar Valley.
Yeah,
there was some
JBAD 1.
Yeah,
Route 1.
There was some offshoot valleys that ran off the Kunar. One of them was the Narang. Oh man, I love that valley. I say that ironically. Tell me about the Narang.
Well, it wasn't without its challenges. Our whole mission was to go up into the Narang on, I do believe, the west side and create a ANP, or Afghan National Police checkpoint, on that western slope of the road. And we had established our VPV. We got, our vehicles in check. But at this point, we had been deployed 12, 13 months. I mean, we were ready to go. And then they come to us and say, you're extended 4 months. Oh, by the way, you're moving somewhere else. And we, I don't think we ever did rotations. We stayed up there the whole time. An extra 4 months. Okay, we just did 12 months. Let's do 4 more months, and then we can go home.
Do you remember the date, the exact date? Or is it a nebulous idea in your mind?
March 2nd, 2007.
March 2nd, 2007.
And it was a full moon. I even remember the moon.
You were asleep.
Well, the full moon, before it came up, like a full moon comes up and you live in a really dark city,
Mm.
it's like the sun just came up.
Yeah.
We had gotten everybody into their positions where they're going to sleep and all this. And I remember it was Lewis's rotation on the ITAS. You were on the 50 cal, I do believe. The truck next to us was you and Sergeant Carter. I don't remember who else was where. I know Doc Ramirez was in the truck down the road, probably 50 yards down the road maybe, because we had to, it was very tight. And I had set up my sleeping position with an Afghan blanket that I had bought, my sleeping bag, and it was in a little wash. Like, it was a dry creek that we were set up in, and I had been talking to Lewis, like I hadn't even fallen asleep really yet. And the full moon came up over the ridge, kind of down to the south, if you will, and it lit us up. Like, you could clearly see where the trucks were. You could see where personnel were. You could clearly see everyone.
So it lit us up, and then they lit us up.
And then, well, they lit me up for sure. The machine gun fire came across my belly, pinging up to my left and up to my right, and my gear, my Kevlar and my vest were laying on my right side. And actually, I thank God that it was. I rolled over to put the gear on, and something jumped up and bit me.
What do you got there in your hands?
That is the bullet that hit me. It struck me in the buttock, kind of where the thigh meets the lower butt cheek. It entered there, and it stopped right next to my groin, like the fatty tissue next to the groin. And in order to get it out, they cut me open north to south on my abdomen, even though you could play with the bullet just below the skin. And I remember getting hit. I remember everything clear as day. I dropped my gear, and I low crawled, and I laid underneath the Humvee, in between the tires, because that's the safest spot. If a bullet's gonna hit the rubber of those tires, it's not gonna go through that rubber. It's really thick Humvee tires. But rounds were still pinging at my feet, out on the outside of the Humvee, out on the ground. And I did what's called the blood sweep. Because it's nighttime, you can't visibly see blood. So you pat yourself, and then you pull your hands close to your face, and you smell, because you're smelling for the iron in your blood.
Okay.
It took a couple of sweeps, but I found it. I thought I laid in a puddle, but when I reached my hands to my face, I immediately repulsed. It was like, oh, wow.
Did you think at the time that it was like a minor wound, or were you feeling fear that it was like something really bad?
Actually, I downplayed it a lot. I didn't feel as though it was major. I didn't feel as though I bled enough that it was major even, but it felt like you take a hot poker, like a hot fire poker, get it red hot, and then stick it in the meatiest part of your body. That's what it felt like. It was hot. It wasn't pain. It was just heat. And once I found it, I reached up, opened the door, and told the LT. Like, I remember looking in the Humvee like, Lieutenant Haynes, I've been shot.
What I remember from that night was Sergeant Carter hearing that you'd been shot and reacting like a maniac, like a
Rambo.
like Rambo holding, was it 249? I think it was a 249, right?
Yeah.
That we had in the truck, and he just holding it one-handed and just loosing off a whole belt like a crazy man,
Yeah.
and just yelling and cussing and man, that's what I remember from that night.
Yeah. I remember it too, and I remember Lewis shouting, like, I'm putting to Lewis, like, hey, they shot me from there, like where they exactly shot from. That's how. I wasn't adrenaline filled, but that's how aware I was of the surroundings and where it was coming from. You know, in order to get like fire superiority, and we didn't have to guess where they were shooting at us from.
Right.
You know.
So they took you to Bagram? Oh, actually, no.
No,
The medevac that was coming in got canceled.
Yeah, the air evac got canceled, and I ended up getting ground evac'd.
Yeah, that's right.
Because the way the litters are designed is they're designed to go in between the doors perfectly. And so they put me in the back seat of a Humvee from another platoon,
Right.
and they ground evac'd me from there to Asadabad. They had a forward surgical team in
Okay.
Asadabad, so they could prep me for surgery. They could do the surgery and everything.
And from there, they air evac'd you to Bagram.
Yeah, they air evac'd me from there to Bagram, and I remember being in the room, the room that they were prepping. Like, I could look over and see where they were prepping me, or the bed and everything for the surgery. And then I could look over to my right and see the big whiteboard. And it had check marks on it. And I remember looking at it and being like, 2 IVs. Okay. 2 IVs. Hey, guys, there's not a check mark on 2 IVs, and I got 2 IVs in my arms. You know, so I remember I was
pretty conscious.
I was very, very conscious. Probably for another 5 minutes.
And then you were out.
Then I was out, and the next time I woke up was when they were loading me into the Black Hawk to take me to Bagram.
I got you. So when did you rejoin the platoon?
I didn't rejoin the platoon. Actually, you guys ended up rejoining me. You guys came into country, and I was actually still on medical leave.
Okay.
Because I had to do some inpatient and outpatient in launch school in Germany, which was a lot of fun just because I'm now the living Forrest Gump, or a living Forrest Gump. So I did the Forrest Gump skit all through Germany. But I was there when you guys came home because I didn't go anywhere. And then you guys came back, and we just kind of picked up. I still had some recovery to do, obviously. You know, I couldn't PT the way that I used to be able to PT. You know, I couldn't do sit-ups the way I was able to do sit-ups before. And that was a real struggle. You know, I always ran my heart out doing PT. And I always struggled at push-ups anyway, because what led me to going to 132 was I messed up my shoulder in another unit.
Okay. So there's one thing that I know we lost big time was having you and all the things you did. I mean, you were the mechanic. You were, the RTO. You were the guy that if something needed to be done, the LT called Greer. That's what it was. It was just the way it was. Nobody else would do it, or nobody else could do it. So we come back. I get out of the military, and that's where my involvement with your story kind of ends.
Yeah, you almost dropped off the face of the earth at that point.
So you deployed 2009?
Yes, it was. I don't remember the exact date. I'm pretty sure it was fall 2009. You know, like August maybe. Not 100%.
Okay.
I do
But-
remember the being there for the major event of Cop Keating.
Okay.
So I remember being there for that, but I don't remember how long we had been there already.
Okay. So you deployed to the exact same spot where we were.
The same base that we established, Dog Base, we established at the end of the first deployment was the same base I deployed again the second time. It was built up. At this point, we had a whole nother side, not just the side that we had the mortars on.
Okay.
We had 155s. We had a mechanic bay. We had a big fuel bladder. And it was built up pretty huge at this point.
You had an accident, Greer.
Yeah. We had established a VPB at the mouth of the same valley I got shot in.
So assume that the people out there do not know what VPB means.
It's
What is
a
that?
vehicle patrol base.
Vehicle patrol base. Okay.
You set up the vehicles in such a way that it's got 360 security.
Okay.
We had HESCO wall built up in the front, which is a mesh metal screen, and it's got a mesh in it, and you fill it with dirt and rock.
All right.
And that it does stop RPGs. I mean, we've got pictures of RPGs sticking out of it and nothing coming out the other side.
Oh, Afghanistan. You gotta love it.
Yeah. And there was an area we called One Tree Hill, or I called One Tree Hill,
Okay.
because it had one tree growing on top of this hill. Don't know how, but on the other side of it was where I got shot,
Okay.
where we were setting up that checkpoint.
Okay.
And I would point up there all the time to the new guys, hey, that's where I was when I got shot, because all the new guys knew the story.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
they created new nicknames, and so they all knew the story.
It's Forrest Gump. It's the guy who got shot in the ass. Yeah, I
Yes.
got it.
And, you know, I embraced it. I love it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't mind being the butt of some jokes,
The butt. I see what
Yes.
you did there.
you know, and I don't mind being laughed at, because if you're not laughing with them, that's a problem. I'm always laughing with them.
Okay.
You know, because it's just having a positive attitude about it and being able to kind of move on from it.
So how long in this deployment? How long into the deployment was it before you had your Humvee accident?
I want to say right around 6 months.
Right around.
I
6
know
months.
it was after my R&R. It might have been before. The timing is kind of messed up during this second deployment.
Okay.
Because the Humvee, we were moving the Humvee to put the ITAS on top of it.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing the creak of the emergency brake being set. And then next thing I know, the Humvee's moving backwards down the hill. The driver had gotten out and gone around to the front, and that's when it started moving.
Were you at this point having visions back to the incident with Depot, since you're standing up there on the gun?
No.
No?
The thought did cross my mind that I will not jump out of the gun. Because I do remember Depot said that if something were to happen, I'm going to jump out of the gun, because it's quicker to jump out of the gun than it is to try to get inside the Humvee.
Okay.
Because those old Humvees didn't have a release for the seat, so the seat was always swinging and it was always in the way.
Yeah.
But these new Humvees had an emergency pull cord on it, so I'm like, you know what? I'm not gonna jump out of the Humvee, especially while it's moving. And it wasn't rolling; it was just moving backwards on all fours. And I was scared for my life. I was absolutely scared. You know, because it's not enemy fire, but it's still, nobody's in control of the vehicle. So it's out of control. It's out of anybody's hands, even my own. The only thing that is in my hands is my own life and what I decide to do on how to preserve it.
Okay.
And we had multiple roads going up this hill, and the whole time I'm pulling on this pull cord, but I'm sitting on the seat. All my weight is on this seat, so it's not going to release with pressure on it. And I remember it bounced just enough to kind of push me up out of the seat, and the pull cord came down. And in that second that the pull cord came down and I hit the center of the vehicle, because that's where the turret is.
Right.
The vehicle hit the Hesco wall. And I say it was probably going 15, 20 miles an hour. It's going pretty fast downhill.
Yeah.
I mean, those things Humvees are heavy. These new Humvees were even heavier.
Right.
And it hit that wall pretty hard. I mean, it caved in the wall, at least 4 or 5 inches.
Okay.
Didn't do a whole lot of damage to the Humvee, but I was inside.
Right.
The Humvee stopped, but I still had room to move. And so I kept moving until my body came to a complete stop. And I hit the firewall, which is like 1.5 inch, 2 inch steel plate. I don't remember much after that, except waking up to hearing people screaming my name, telling me to get out of the vehicle, And what they didn't realize is I had just gotten knocked out. Like, I was wearing my Kevlar and my kit at this time, so I was kind of protected. But that jolt, it just rips your head back.
Right.
And that hurt so bad, and I still have issues today from that. I can't move certain directions real fast. I can't come back from moving certain directions real fast. I actually have to think about it and be like, okay, come back slow, so that my muscles don't just spasm and it's painful.
So let's move on to a different aspect. Before that first deployment, you were married?
No. No, I was seeing a woman that was going through a divorce, okay. And she had gotten divorced throughout that first deployment, and then when we got back, that's when I got married. I got married in between the 2 deployments.
Okay. It was when you got back on the second deployment. When was it that you realized you were having issues?
Wasn't immediate, but it was pretty close. It was within, because we got back in 2010. It was somewhere in 2011. So actually, we had probably been back a good 6 months.
Okay.
When I started having sleep issues. I started having night sweats. I started having real bad tremors, which at the time my wife thought was like a restless leg syndrome, or, wasn't sure what it was. She immediately went to a medical condition, but her telling me about it is what made it, okay, there's something going on.
Okay.
I did get diagnosed with restless leg syndrome. But still, I'd wake up and we'd have to change the sheets because of how much I would sweat and shake in the bed. And that's, I kind of downplayed that as well. I chalked it up as, things just happen.
When did you have the incident? How far into?
I don't remember exactly.
Okay.
I remember driving to work. Like, we had after deployments, you always get new influx of people and people exiting. Um, and we had gotten some new people in, and at this point, I'm senior specialist. Like, I'm a specialist that's been to 2 deployments,
With
and
the
I'd
same
been in it.
company
Yeah,
and the same
with same
place.
company, same platoon, same everything. And at this point, I had been in around 7 years. So an E4, 7 years. Yeah,
It's
I
not-
made my mistakes.
Yeah.
You know, so I would get bumped down, and I'd have to work my way back up again. It happens. But I remember consciously thinking that I was going to do something after lunch, and that's when I called the suicide hotline, and I told them, you know, who I was. I told them what my plan was and everything, and they had actually called the MPs, because I remember parking in a certain spot, like not even a parking spot. It was just right next to a pole. And the next thing I remember is I'm being put in handcuffs. Like, I had the knife in my hand and everything, and then I wake up in handcuffs.
What was your plan?
I was gonna do a homicide-suicide. I had specific targets, and the end of it was I was gonna commit suicide.
You told me the other day that at that time you felt like a failure because of all the work that you'd put in.
Yeah, I mean, all that time being in, I knew a lot of things, but I didn't know it by the book. I knew it because I did it. I knew it because I instituted it when we were deployed or during field exercises. So I never went to the board to become an NCO because I didn't feel as though I could get asked a question and immediately be able to answer it, And so I decided that I'm just going to stay a specialist. However long I'm in, I'm just going to stay a specialist until they're sick of me and be like, here's E5 or here's corporal or, kind of thing.
Did this incident, how did it affect your relationship with your wife?
At first, it didn't do a whole lot. I mean, obviously it raises questions. But when I got out of that hospital stay, I immediately got out of that hospital stay for, I think it was a week, and then I had to get transferred to a long-term stay.
Okay. At some point, you and your wife were going through a rocky patch, and you went down to Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about Kentucky.
I'll never go back again. I will never step foot in Kentucky again.
Okay.
I was going through some relationship issues with my wife, because of, the constant, like, it's not your PTSD that's an issue, you're an issue. I was being accused of blaming my PTSD for the way I was acting, which was absolutely true because I knew what it was. But I ended up getting into a relationship with a woman that at the time I did not know was married. And then that failed. And so the failure part again was there. And at this point I had already stayed one 30-day stay in a mental ward and a couple of just week-long stays. But I had gotten out at this point. I had already transitioned from the military to civilian life again, right, which was difficult. It's probably one of the most difficult things any soldier can do.
So, was it the same night where you had the altercation with the woman you were having a relationship with. Was that the same night that you decided to end it all?
No, it was a couple of days later
Okay.
because I had attempted. Actually, it was probably about a week later because
Okay.
I had attempted before, like right after the event happened. Um, I attempted to crash my truck, and then when that didn't work, I was walking. As soon as a car was coming this way, I was walking the middle of their lane. When they would go by me and honk and whatever, then a car coming the other direction, I'd get in that lane. And next thing I know, a cop's pulling up saying, "Hey, we got phone calls about you." He didn't handcuff me, nothing. He put me in the back seat and drove me. I forget where he drove me, but he drove me. He did some intake, and I was instituted for 3 days. And I signed myself out. It was a civilian hospital. He knew I was military. He saw my military ID, and then they still put me in a civilian hospital.
So the night that you decided to do it, was it a conscious decision that you did? Like you just
Yeah.
said,
Absolutely. It was. I was kind of at the end of my rope at that point. I was sick of failing at relationships. I was sick of moving around all the time. Because of the failed relationships. I had 2 dogs, and I was living with some friends that would take care of them. And the dogs loved the kids, so I knew they would take care of them. So it wasn't a thought then that my dogs wouldn't be taken care of. It was at this point that I said I'm done. I emptied one bottle of a prescription medication, and then I filled my hand. I mean, I got pretty big hands, and I filled it with Tylenol and took it all. I even took a picture of my wife because I was still technically married at this time. Took a picture of the pills in my hand, the empty pill bottle, and me sitting with my feet at the fire. And that's the last thing I remember. I woke up probably about 3.5 days later with really big bruises on my wrist.
tell me about that time you were out.
So I know from coming out that I was in an induced coma for 3 days. But in that 3 days, like it wasn't, I wasn't blank. My mind was still working. And I was in a happy place. I was with my grandfather walking around our happy place, which, it's a pond or a lake back home in Colorado. One of our favorite spots. We'd visited his shooting bench because my grandfather had died in 2011 before I got out. And this was probably 5 years ago when this happened. But I woke up. I remember him talking to me. I don't remember the conversation. I couldn't tell you. I just know I woke up and said, that is never happening again. That is no longer an option for me. And I asked, are my dogs okay? And did I hurt anybody? Because waking up with bruises on my wrist, I could only gather where they came from. Being strapped to a gurney and breaking it and like being violent, I had no idea what a handful or a huge heaping handful of Tylenol would do. No idea.
So at this point, you're going through this. You've just woken up. You've decided it's not enough. Did you have a plan? Did you have a plan moving forward on how to get better, on what to do?
Not until I was actually like in the institution. I was in, well, it wasn't an institution. It was a medical ward. And I was in there for another 30 days.
When did you move to Colorado?
The first time? 2016.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't long after that event.
Okay. And you found some measure of peace there.
Yeah, because I mean, there's two things that's really weird. One is it's God's country. You can really feel a spiritual sense there. And number two,
Well,
it actually
I'm sure people in Texas would argue with you, okay? But
I'm sure.
continue.
I'm sure. And two, it looked a lot like northeast Afghanistan.
Kind of mountainous terrain. And
Very mountainous, valleys all over the place, you know, only certain ways in and out of a place, and but it brought some semblance of peace to it.
How big has your family been in your travails?
My immediate family, like my sister, my dad, my mom, you know, even having conversations with my brother, um, all of that it's very vital. That having that family support is very vital. So when you don't get it from someone that you think should have your back, it's troubling. You know,
That's,
it messes with your psyche big time.
that's understandable. What has helped you the most? Is it the VFW? Is it the mountains?
It's a combination of being around family, my dogs. My dogs have actually helped me more than anything because I have a blue heeler and a golden retriever. And the golden retriever, they're not very active. I mean, they are, but when you compare them to a cattle dog, um, but she knows her job. She's a heavy dog, so she wakes me up when I'm having bad dreams. Um, but she's the one that's sitting on the couch next to you, and you're just breathing. You're focusing on giving her attention and breathing. The blue heeler, well, she kind of gets you off your butt. They need attention. They need to run. They need to get that energy out. I mean, it's like having a 6-year-old kid stay 6 years old for years. That's how much energy they have. But they have specific roles, kind of like having children. It it gives me something to do. Like I have to look after these dogs. I have to make sure when I get up, I feed them, I water them, and they go out to use the bathroom. Because really, they can't really do that on their own. You know, but being around family when something happens, or maybe even to keep you busy with something, um, is really a big help because you always have someone to turn to. Like, hey, I'm having a bad day, you know, and either they they're gonna leave you alone, or they're gonna sit down and not leave you alone because you don't need to be left alone.
Um, you've been in the VFW now?
Yes, I got involved in the VFW before I went back to New York, because I decided I needed to give it 110% in in my marriage because I still had yet to get divorced. Because I still, and even to this day, you know, I still love her, you know, and I always will. But I felt as though I hadn't in previous times given it 110%. But before that, I had gotten involved in the VFW, you know, and that's where it's the veterans of foreign wars. Um, I feel as though that organization really helps veterans more than any other, especially locally, because you have the Elks. Anybody in a community can join the Elks, whether you're civilian, military. You can join an Elks Lodge.
Right.
And then you have the American Legion, which only veterans, only people who have served, whether it was peacetime, whether it was time of war and you never deployed or you did deploy.
Right.
And then the circle gets even tighter with the VFW. You have to have certain ribbons. You have to have, certain tours, crossing. There's a certain line in the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean that you would cross in order to get like combat pay during a time of war. You could join as a member of the VFW.
Okay.
That's why it's called the Veterans of Foreign Wars.
It's a very close-knit group.
Very.
On individual post, I'm assuming.
Yeah. And even in individual post, I mean, you got guys coming in from, the Korean War when there were already guys from Vietnam in the VFW. And they were kind of looked at the same. Like, you guys are the new guys coming into here. You got to watch us and watch what we do. And that's kind of the way it is with our generation going at the VFW. Like, you don't go in there and, you don't like something, you're like, oh, we need to change that. No, you watch, you observe, and you just be a part of it. And that's kind of where I saw my vision and my best ability to help is helping veterans from foreign wars. Because PTSD wasn't really known until Iraq, Afghanistan. Not even the Gulf War. It was really known then what this was. It finally had a name after Iraq and Afghanistan.
But I would argue that even the people who have it don't necessarily understand it to its fullest.
Right. And I've had conversation with the very few World War II vets that are still alive in our neighborhood. The Vietnam, Kuwait, those huge, because Kuwait's not a deployment now. I know some would argue different, but Kuwait's not a deployment. If you can get coffee on the daily and pizza and Burger King Burger King, because Burger King had the military contract. That's not a deployment. When you're eating MREs every single day, like 3 meals a day and not having a shower, like that's a deployment. But, during those wars, they come back and they were messed up. I mean, you figure they got called some pretty bad names when they come back from Vietnam.
Yeah.
They weren't very welcomed. It wasn't until recently when the welcoming started really happening. The acknowledgement of, man, you just went over and fought for our country. Thank you.
There was like an overcorrection coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan where they were like, well, let's not do what we did with the Vietnam veterans. Let's like overcorrect and like super compliment these guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember going through an airport and people would get off their computer, they would get off their phone, whatever they were doing, they would put down their book and they would line the hall and clap.
Let's talk about what you want to do in the future for veterans.
Well, my mission now, when I woke up from my suicide attempt, is I want to help the suicide. I want to keep from the 22 a day. There's multiple organizations. 22 until none. There's Team Red, White, and Blue. There's Grunt Style. There's multiple organizations that they recognize the 22 a day. And there was a time at the beginning of the year, and even before the whole pandemic, when it was actually up to about almost 30 a day was the average.
That's terrible.
Yeah. I mean, one's too many. But I don't want to add to the numbers. I want to keep as many as possible away from committing suicide.
What's your plan for that?
Talking about it. You know, at my VFW, we have a VTAC. It's the Veterans Thursday Afternoon Social Club. Because as if we don't have enough acronyms in our life.
Yeah, it's very military of you.
Yes. And it started out in Hawaii as a PTSD group.
Okay.
This psychologist would take some of the veterans and have a barbecue at his house. One of those veterans lives in Colorado now, and he started a PTSD group, and he would just show up with like 4 or 5 pizzas and just, oh, nobody showed up today. Okay. But he kept doing it. Finally, people started coming in. And then finally we stopped calling it a PTSD group because PTSD is an issue, and sometimes just calling that, it triggers them. It triggers something in their mind that, oh, I don't need a PTSD group. You know, like some alcoholics. I don't need an alcoholic group. I don't need that. So we changed the name into the social club. Even though we have it at the VFW, we changed it to kind of restructure it a little bit. If you're staying away from drinking, it's okay. We're not a bar that happens to have a meeting hall or a VFW. We are a VFW that has a bar or a canteen, as we call it. That's secondary to what we provide, you know, because the mission of the VFW is to help veterans, and that's kind of where I felt more at home. You know, I started getting more active. I created a hospitality, you know, because we have a hall that you can rent out for an event, whether it be a wedding, a quinceañera, you know, a graduation party.
Right.
You know, we needed people to circumvent between the wedding party or that party and the VFW, because they would need lights on or off. They would need, you know, tables moved, or they would need another extension cord, like whatever they needed. And obviously, you get a lot of people in one area. Well, the bathrooms need toilet paper. You know, they need paper towels, soap. They don't need to deal with that. The hospitality crew deals with that.
Gotcha.
You know, and at the time, we kind of acted as security. And it was very few of us. It was maybe me and a couple of other people. And that kind of gave me a sense of purpose, sense of something to do. You know, and people looked forward to, oh, we got an event at the VFW. Oh, that means, you know, these certain people are going to be there. You know, it put a face out there.
How important is having a purpose?
It's probably the most important thing to any mental health. PTSD in general, it's a huge help, because if you don't have a purpose, then you feel as though, why am I even here then? Like, I'm left to sit and wallow in what's going on inside of me.
Which just adds to the feeling of failure, the feeling of isolation.
Yeah. You know, so having not just having a sense of purpose, but not being alone in that sense of purpose. You know, you're doing something with other people. You're doing something that you meet other people, you know, like hospitality. I'm not seeing the same people every party. Although, you know, when you live in a predominantly Mexican area, quinceañeras, usually each quinceañera, you end up seeing the same family over and over again, you know, whether they're attending it or whether it's for them, you know,
right.
you're seeing familiar faces, and it starts to get easier.
What's your advice for any veteran who might be watching this and has that feeling of failure, that feeling of isolation?
You're not. There are people around you. There are people you can talk to. You know, there's always someone that will pick up the phone. You know, if you have to call every person in your phone, call them until someone picks up the phone. You know, because somebody will. You know, um, find find something like, you know, I work with paracord a lot. I make dog leashes, I make bracelets, I make whatever because I love working with paracord. It's not just because of my military, but it's easy to work with.
Right.
um, your community has, I'm sure, a VFW. Go in there and just sit and just observe. Next thing you know, someone's going to come up to you and be like, hey, you're new here, and just strike up a conversation, and sometimes that's all it takes. You know, but you have to know, you have to be in a place that you want the help, and you need to reach out. You know, you need to get help.
To that end, you were telling me the other day that you were a big advocate for the suicide hotline.
Yeah.
How was your how was your experience with them? Were they helpful?
Very. You know, they kept me on the phone, but they knew what my plan was. You know, and they knew roughly about where I was. You know, but they kept me on the phone. They didn't, hey, I need to put you on hold for a second in order for them to call the MPs. No, they said, hey, you know, you call them.
Right.
And I could see where that could be an issue, where a veteran calls and, you know, the local PD is brought out. And I know from experience that seeing a police officer come to your door can be very traumatic. But you have to know that sometimes that's all the resources they have.
Right.
You know, they don't have a suicide team that dresses in plain clothes and comes out and says, hey, we're just doing a checkup, you know, heard you needed some help or whatever. You know, so if that happens, just know that these people are here to help you. And you never know who in blue is a veteran or not.
Right.
You know, I've run into quite a few that are veterans, because most of them, that's, if you're a grunt, you have that specific skill set that allows you to go straight into law enforcement. So having a team, having like something I wanted to, or some friends and I wanted to start in Durango, was a veterans kind of response force that worked with the police department. Whenever they got a call that a veteran was in need, we would get a call. We would go out to the house, plain clothes, we're veterans, and the police would be there, but they'd be there as backup, you know, and automatically, hey, brother, how are you doing? You know, you answer the door, hey, brother, hey, sister. Automatically, that connection, like, you know that he's a veteran, you know that she's a veteran. You don't know their trauma, you don't know any of their backstory, but you show up and you're there. It sometimes just having a conversation helps. But one of my biggest things that I learned during my treatment was that I started saying the same story every time I talked to somebody. Finally, when I woke up from my suicide attempt and I stopped telling that story and started telling the truth, I started saying what was really going on. And that's when that's when they were really able to treat me. That's when they really were able to, okay, let's get a group in here of other veterans from other wars for you to talk to. Let's, you know, are you religious? Find a church. Visit multiple churches until you find one that it just speaks to you. And then go. They have small groups. Bible studies and stuff that might help you. And if you're not religious, find a group. Hopefully, there are places that have small veteran groups, and try to do a one-on-one with another veteran, peer-to-peer. That's the biggest thing I'm trying to start is a peer-to-peer. You call me, you need someone to talk to. Hey, let's go down to the VFW. We don't have to drink. We can grab water or soda and go to the back hall and, hey, let's have a one-on-one conversation. You're starting to feel better? All right, it's Thursday. Let's go start a group. Let's go to the group. And the VTAC, we talk about our day. We talk about our week because it's every Thursday, so it's week to week. Hey, can you join the post? Hey, there you go. Become a member, and then we hold events and we need more people to help move furniture or move tables, or it gives you something to do instead of being at home isolated, and maybe it gets you, that little bit of break away from your significant other, that now you're with brothers. Now you're with brothers and sisters in arms, so they understand what you've been through.
The Army, some of the toughest men I know that I fought with, and that there is a culture of no malingering, no. There's a culture of toughness,
also known as pride.
And that would be my recommendation to any veteran out there. Is that it's a demon that you can't wrestle on your own. You need help. And if you're feeling that, man, just reach out. That would be my recommendation. Is reach out to somebody.
Yeah, there's a lot of memes and symbols on anchors. Pride, self-esteem. There are multiple anchors that are holding you down and holding you from getting help. Know that you reaching out and getting help doesn't change any of that. It doesn't get rid of the pride that you have. It doesn't get rid of the self-esteem that you have. You just have to put that aside to really get at the demon that is really holding you down, which a lot of times is PTSD. And, that PTSD can come from war. It can come from sexual trauma. It can come from, being countryside, being stateside, and just something happened during basic training. There are people that have PTSD from basic training, just because the breakdown of a human, they have to break you down to build you into the soldier you're going to become. Sometimes that just breaks the human altogether.
Well, Greer, I know you have a heart to serve, and I'm glad you found a measure of peace. Thank you very much for coming on the slope and telling your story.
I couldn't do this 4 years ago. But now that I can, come here and talk with you about it, it helps.
Many thanks to Chris Garcia and his girlfriend, Alejandra. Without you guys, I could not do this, and I want to give you many, 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 many thanks. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. Have a good day, everybody.